Hello everyone, so in this video I will be talking you through the meaning for the poem Excerpt from the Prelude by William Wordsworth. So before we begin, the main thing you need to know about this poem is that it is an excerpt. The Prelude by William Wordsworth is a very, very long poem. It's what we call an epic poem. So what we just have here is just a small part of the poem. The Prelude does cover quite a lot of Wordsworth's life, and when you do get to the GCSE Poetry Anthology, we have a different excerpt from the Prelude in that anthology that looks at Wordsworth's childhood. So what I'm going to do in this video, first of all, is I'm going to read through the poem for you, and then I will go through line by line, part by part, and I will discuss the meaning of the poem for you. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to read the poem. One summer evening, led by her, I found a little boat tied to a willow tree within a rocky cove, its usual home. Straight I unloosed her chain and stepping in pushed from the shore. It was an act of stealth and troubled pleasure, nor without the voice of mountain echoes did my boat move on, leaving behind her still, on either side, small circles glittering idly in the moon, until they melted all into one track of sparkling light. But now, like one who rose proud of his skill to reach a chosen point with an unswerving line, I fixed my view upon the summit of a craggy ridge, the horizon's utmost boundary. Far above was nothing but the stars and the grey sky. She was an elfin pinnacle. Lustily I dipped my oars into the silent lake, and as I rose upon the stroke, my boat went heaving through the water like a swan. When, from behind that craggy steep, till then the horizon's boundary, a huge peak, black and huge, as if with involuntary power instinct, upreared its head. I struck and struck again, and growing still in stature, the grim shape towered up between me and the stars, and still, for so it seemed, with purpose of its own, and measured motion like a living thing, strode after me. With trembling oars I turned and through the silent water stole my way back to the covert of the willow tree. There in her mooring place I left my bark, and through the meadows homeward went, in grave and serious mood. But after I had seen that spectacle, for many days my brain worked with a dim and undetermined sense of unknown modes of being. Oh, my thoughts, their hunger darkness, call it solitude or blank desertion. No familiar shapes remained, no pleasant images of trees, of sea or sky, no colours of green fields, but huge and mighty forms that do not live like living men, moved slowly through the mind by day, and were a trouble to my dreams. Okay, so just as a quick overview to this poem, this is Wordsworth recounting an experience that he had within nature that made him change his perception of nature, and I will go through that a little bit more now. So we open the poem in a first person, from a first person perspective, and it opens with a description of the scene. So one summer evening, led by her, I found a little boat tied to a willow tree within a rocky cove, its usual home. So he's setting up the scene there. In the first line, when Wordsworth mentions led by her, he's referring to nature here. He's personified nature as a woman, as is quite often done within literature. So nature has led him to this place. He's clearly gone on a walk and maybe been exploring, and he's found this little area with a willow tree and a boat and a little rocky cove, and he's ready to go out into the this lake that he can see in front of him. Straight I unloosed her chain and stepping in pushed from the shore. We can see his eagerness here. He immediately steps into the boat. He immediately lets the boat free and pushes off and starts to explore. So we can see his eagerness and his want for freedom here. It was an act of stealth and troubled pleasure. So we do get to see a little bit of caution here, and we do have an oxymoron with the troubled. Oh, sorry, I just dropped my laptop. An oxymoron there with the troubled pleasure. So clearly he feels slightly uncomfortable about what he's doing. Maybe he's a little bit cautious about taking advantage of nature here. Nor without the voice of mountain echoes did my boat move. So again, we have nature personified because we have this voice coming from the mountain quite far in the distance. And it almost seems quite ominous, actually, this voice from the mountains following him and echoing as the boat moves. It sets the scene that maybe there is something quite ominous going on here. leaving behind her still on either side small circles glittering idly in the moon, until they melted all into one track of sparkling light. With the small circles appearing behind the boat as it moves there, we have this idea coming through that is quite often featured within romantic poetry, that nature is long lasting. So even as the boat has kind of sailed away, there's still these little circles within the water staying behind him. With the idea of with the reference to the moon and with the the glittering and the sparkling light, we see the beauty but also the mystery of nature at this part in the poem here. By now, like one who rows, proud of his skill to reach a chosen point with an unswerving line, I fixed my view upon the summit of a craggy ridge, the horizon's utmost boundary. So what we have literally here is a description of him kind of setting his goal, where he's going to row to. He's very happy at this point. He's very proud and confident and determined in the boat, and he's decided he's going to aim to row to this craggy ridge, this mountain that he can see in the distance, and he feels like that's the furthest point he can go. This is the horizon's utmost boundary. That's the furthest point he can see, and that's where he set himself to go to. However, we do also have with the idea of the summit and the craggy ridge, it does almost seem quite looming, quite imposing, quite dangerous as well there. So that's his aim, but there's a sense of danger coming through there. Far above was nothing but the stars and the grey sky. Again, an idea that, as we said before, quite often comes through romantic poetry, nature being very vast. So as he kind of leans back, all he can see above him, there's nothing but the stars and the grey sky as far as he can see. So we have that kind of contrast between him and his little boat, humans being quite small and insignificant, nature being completely vast around him. She was an elfin pinnacle. Again, they're kind of highlighting again, kind of like this, the small size and insignificance of humans. She, in this case, is the boat. Elfin is obviously like an elf, something you see in a fantasy. A pinnace is it's another word for a boat. So the boat itself is very, very small. It's very agile as it kind of darts through the lake, but it is dwarfed by this sheer size and capacity of nature. Lustily, I dipped my oars into the silent lake. So here we see his kind of enjoyment, but also he seems almost a little bit greedy the way he's enjoying nature here. The silent lake creates a sense of calm, but also maybe it's quite eerie that it's quite silent. As I rose upon the stroke, my boat went heaving through the water like a swan. So again, we're still adding to this sense of calm here. Swans are often seen as very graceful when they're swimming. They're very beautiful, very graceful creatures. When they're in the water, not when they're outside kind of snapping at people, but in the water, kind of beautifully, elegantly hovering through the water. That's how he's describing his boat. So we still have this very clear sense of ease and calm at this point, until we get to a very, very sudden tone shift in the next line, when from behind that craggy steep, till then the horizon's boundary, a huge peak black and huge. So what we have there is he's kind of very suddenly come across that point that he aimed for. He's been rowing very calmly, kind of looking at the sky, enjoying like dipping his oars into the lake. The oars are the things you row with if you're not sure. So he's been very much enjoying the experience, but very suddenly that point that he set himself to row to has appeared. He's now in front of that big craggy mountain, and it's kind of almost crept up on him without him realizing. And he's also realised that from this, the thing that he thought was nature's boundary, the thing that he thought was the end, isn't the end. There's still more, there's still further for him to go. So again, another realisation there, actually, that nature is so massive and vast and endless. The mountain itself, this craggy steep, this huge peak, black and huge, it seems almost quite threatening and large and intimidating in comparison to Wordsworth and his little boat. So the next line. Just waiting for that to move out of the way. As if with voluntary power instinct upreared its head. So here we see the power of nature. Nature is being personified here, almost as if it's raising its head with this power instilled within nature. We see Wordsworth's panic coming through in the next line. I struck and struck again, and growing still in stature, the grim shape towered up between me and the stars. So we kind of see almost the struck and struck is him kind of trying to get back to the rowing, kind of get back into his rhythm of rowing. And we see a little sense of panic as he's kind of realizing just how huge the mountain is. It's still growing as he kind of moves on and on. It gets bigger and bigger, endlessly powerful, endlessly large, endlessly intimidating. And he starts to panic at this point as well. He's towering over him, it's very intimidating. And still, so it seemed, with purpose of its own and measured motion, like a living thing strode after me. So here we see the confidence of nature. It's almost like nature is chasing him. It's like it's a threat. Or the importance of nature is instilled here as well. We now see him we see him leaving at this point. With trembling oars, I turned and through the silent water stole my way back to the covert of the willow tree. So we can see his fear of the power of nature here. The trembling oars, it's instilled him with fear. It's made him afraid. We see him escaping because he's so overwhelmed by the power and the size and the volume of nature. He returns to safety, and this makes this part of the poem quite cyclical. He started by the willow tree, it's where he found the boat, and now he's returned to the willow tree. He's returned to safety now. There in her mooring place I left my bark, and through the meadows homeward went in grave and serious mood. Bark is an archaic word for boat. We don't use that now, but it is where we get the word embark from. Embark is to get on a boat. Okay, so he leaves the boat where he found it. So again, quite cyclical there. And then he goes home. We see that he's very disturbed by this realization that he's had about the size and the power of nature. He's been quite affected by this. He's had a severe impact on his mood. He feels grave, he feels serious. It's clearly weighing quite heavily on him, this realization that nature is so huge and powerful and endless. Moving on, but after I'd seen that spectacle for many days, my brain worked with a dim and undetermined sense of unknown modes of being. This thought stays with him for a very long time. For many days after he's seen it, his brain is kind of still going through this thought and still thinking about how overwhelmed he is by this sense of nature being so huge and powerful and overwhelming. And that is a very strong, lasting impression from this almost seemingly quite small experience, has clearly had a very profound impact on Wordsworth here. Oh, my thoughts, their hunger darkness, call it solitude or blank desertion. So we now almost see a little bit of a glimpse more into what it is that he's realised. He's realised the insignificance of man and mankind in comparison to nature, and how small actually we are and insignificant in comparison to the vastness of nature. And this deeply disturbs him. We see it, he feels like darkness hanging over him. He's very disturbed by this realisation. No familiar shapes remained, no pleasant images of trees, of sea or sky, no colours of green fields. We can see that he's changed his perception of nature completely here. He originally saw nature as a very pleasant, very beautiful thing, very positive connotations here. The pleasant trees, the sea and the sky, and the green fields. All of that has changed. None of those familiar thoughts about nature remain anymore. He's changed his perception completely about what he feels about nature now. He now realizes it can be dangerous, it can be intimidating, it can be overwhelming. But huge and mighty forms that do not live like living men moved slowly through the mind by day and were a trouble to my dreams. So here we kind of have the final point of this excerpt from the Prelude. We see again just leaving us on that final point about the power of nature. It's nothing like mankind, it does not live like living men. It's completely separated from us and the world we experience as humanity, and it haunts him. It moves through his mind in the day, and it troubles him in his dreams at night. So this thought is staying with him, it's haunting him, it's almost it's really bothering him actually, the fact that we are so small and insignificant in comparison to our world and the world around us. It really, really bothers and haunts Wordsworth at this within this section here. So that is this poem explained to you. I really hope this video helped you, and if you can now move back to the PowerPoint and make sure you carry on with the tasks. Thank you, everyone.